because they're not meme coins. They're probably the highest form of a utility token. So try to figure out what is the value of these different assets, right? Bridge back to Bittensor, or even just explore the ecosystem. Try to figure out what these different subnets do. Don't just be an investor. Try to really understand the technology so you could see the implications. In terms of participants within the Bittensor ecosystem, I say take advantage of the rails that we're laying, this infrastructure that we've created, right? So then you can go and try to build, various types of applications. Outside of the idea of like bridging over, providing liquidity, so then you could increase liquidity depth for the tokens that you support. So then you could be able to, tap into this larger market as, one of the main reasons. So like it was like once I understood this, it was like this is all I want to spend my time on because this is like there's no technology that I've ever seen that I think will change the world as dramatic as AI, and especially at that time what I understood of AI, which was very, very small compared to what I understand now. And I still believe that. Like it's if anything, my belief is like 1,000 times larger compared to then.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Hansel Melo, the founder of VoidAI, Subnet 106. We cover Hansel's early Bittensor mining, validators, and Hugging Face apps. He was early pushing the AI crypto boundaries. Now he is pivoting into cross-chain bridging with wrapped Solana tokens and V3 pools, aimed at making Bittensor multi-chain DeFi composable. Now, back to Hansel with the 66th Ventura Labs podcast. All right. Hansel Melo of Void AI. How you doing today, man?
Great, great. Can't complain. Another day on BitTensor. How are you?
Another day in Bittensor, indeed. Yeah, I'm doing great as well. And you have a slide deck here, little
Yeah,
presentation, if you want to just kick it off with Void AI here.
totally. I know this presentation has made its rounds, a few other podcasts, but I had to bring the level over here as well. So yeah, let's go right into it. Um, yeah, like to be honest with you, like what AI kind of starts like a couple years ago, like when we were just trying to figure out how to like just build within the AI space in general. Right back then, 2021, 2022, there was no chat GPT. There was only like this playground where you kind of play around with the hyperparameters, paste in some context, just so then you could get the right output, so then you could be able to do something with it. And at that time, like it would hallucinate majority of the time. So like I remember having to like play around with it. I would even let my wife know she was at the university at the time. I let her know to like play around with it just to kind of help her with the research. And like we were both just sitting here just trying to figure out how to make it work. And then like I finally got it down, and then I started applying it to the work I was doing at the time, where I was currently working at this blockchain app development company, which focused on like building these decentralized applications on these various chains. Um, and like at that time, like I really was doing a lot of research trying to figure out like what would be like, potential products that clients would be interested in building. And even some clients that were just coming to us with an idea already in mind. So we were just trying to figure out how to kind of design the product. And at that time, I would really take like 2, 3, 4 weeks, try to get everything down. And it was pretty tedious because like if we're kind of managing multiple clients at the same time, it's like I'm spreading my time very thin, especially like I'm kind of overloading myself because like I'm trying to like design this one product, do research around it, make sure that the technicals are aligned while simultaneously looking at various other products from other clients. So like I just needed to solve this problem. And luckily like I was already playing around with the playground at the time, and I just, took it upon myself to really apply myself to figure out how to really reduce that time from like 4 weeks to like less than 1 week. Um, and I found that like yeah, if I really paste in a lot of context at that time, the context window was relatively small, but they grew it, as they release newer versions of GPT-3. I remember they released a version where like you could be able to paste in like a good amount of context. And that was like the first breakthrough. That's when I seen like, okay, like I was able to like also plop in like what we had at the time, like this document to kind of like give you instructions for how to like how to structure the white paper pretty much. So what I did was I gave it the context about the product that we're looking to build. I gave it, this instructions document essentially. And lo and behold, the output was a white paper. And it pretty much lined up perfectly with the way that we structured in the instructions document. And that was such an exciting moment because it's like wow, like I don't have to stay here for another 3, 4 weeks trying to like piece this together. I can just get this one output, you know, and a couple goals, and then like I just make tweaks here and there just to make sure like it didn't hallucinate and has all the right details. And I remember presenting it to one of the first clients, and they just loved it. Like they just loved it. And like that at that point, it just told me like, okay, either I need to show the rest of my team that I was leading at the time how to do the exact same thing, or I could just simplify it by just creating this application. They just plop in the context, click one button, and it generates the white paper. And that's what I kind of set out to do. And at the time, there was like one like application that would kind of help you build an AI app using OpenAI. I think it was called Riku at the time. Surprised I even remember the name. But yeah, I played around with it and like I managed to get something. Like I'm completely self-taught in regards to like everything technical. So like when I was playing around with Riku, I was just sitting here just like trying to get the right data sets, trying to get um the right context within the context window. Also, once the front end was live, like I just needed to, make the user experience as like seamless as possible. And once I got everything down, I started letting people use it, and then I started seeing my bill from OpenAI, and it was like, oh my God, this is not good. Like I'm spending like practically $1 every request, because at that time it was pretty expensive. Like it's nothing like today where it's like, every request is minuscule. It's not even a 1 cent, right? And yeah, so I seen that. And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to be sustainable. Even if I charge like $100 a month, which I highly doubt these, you know, 5, 10 guys are going to really pay. It's even if they all paid, it still wouldn't even be enough to cover the expenses. So what I needed to do was like, figure out an alternative. And luckily at that time, I was also dabbling in Bittensor because I was already looking at various other projects at the intersection of AI and blockchain. There wasn't many. There was Ocean Protocol with their like data marketplace in 2020. I remember playing in that game. It didn't really work out. Everything actually kind of rugged because nobody really knew how to like properly value data sets. Um, Made some money there though. Pretty awesome experience. And then I found Vector Space. That's actually where I met well, I got really closely acquainted with Shrimp and Timo and a few other guys that's still within the ecosystem right today. Like Terrence especially. Yeah, and like this guy was saying like, oh yeah, we're gonna use language models to like try to predict the stock market, and like that was very, very interesting because it's like nobody else is talking about language models. And like I said, GPT-3 at that time with the playground, that was a language model. Many people didn't understand that, but at least I found that pattern, and I was like, okay, they're doing something around the same space as OpenAI, so this may be interesting. But then like with time, you kind of realize like they had these weekly calls, and I would listen in on them, and like you could hear like at first like they were really enthusiastic, making progress, but then over time like it just flatlined. Like you could kind of see like they weren't really crypto natives. They were really looking just to extract liquidity, just to like fund other projects completely outside like what they were working on with vector space. So like that kind of prompted me to like kind of pull out my funds and redirect my energy. And luckily at that time, Shrimp and Timo let me know about like BitTension, and I dove right into it. try to learn as much as I can. And then they launched mainnet in November 2021. And like I remember the first week, Tim would send me a message. He's like, "Did you start mining yet?" And I'm like, "Ah, no," because like I'm reading the I'm just reading like the documentation at that time, and it was just too much. It was like I've never done this before in my life, so it's like this is a huge barrier to entry for me. Like I don't know if I can figure it out, but like he was like, "No, you got to do it. Like this is a huge opportunity. Just force yourself, you know." Um, and like I just did. I just I played around with the playground as much as I could. It hallucinated quite a bit, but it helped me get started. And like, yeah, and I quickly went from running one miner to somehow running 100 miners. And at that time, like, it was insane because like there was only like one subnet, and it was like I think it was 128 total UIDs. So it was, oh no, I think it was 256 actually. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was 256. It was only one subnet, and like yeah, I just had a majority of the UIDs, and they were like, I remember everybody was like, what are you doing? Like, you're kind of going crazy there. And I'm just like, I'm just trying to make the best of it. Like, and like, I'm over here trying to like deploy all these models from Hugging Face. Literally, I'm learning everything. Like, I didn't even know about Hugging Face at that time. And I'm glad I did, because like now I see what Hugging Face is, and like, especially within the market. And yeah, like I downloaded a few models, got going, running those miners. I even created like the first like explainer of Bittensor, like what is Bittensor, and like you kind of look it up on Twitter, you see it was like in 2022 I released it. And it was like it went really deep. It explained like the transformer architecture, how like that was like the biggest breakthrough, which enabled GPT-3 and all these generalizable models. And at the same time, like the transformer architecture, you could feed it any type of data, whether it's like text, image, audio, and then the output, you know, will be also multimodal. So like it was like once I understood this, it was like this is all I want to spend my time on, because this is like there's no technology that I've ever seen that I think that will change the world as dramatic as AI, and especially at that time what I understood of AI, which was very, very small compared to what I understand now. And I still believe that. Like it's if anything, my belief is like 1,000 times larger compared to then. But it's crazy because then it was like, okay, I got operating, I'm running all these miners. What's the next step? And going back to what I was talking about previously with the application, the next logical step was running a validator. Because at that time, if you run a validator, it was essentially the gateway to the models that the miners were running. And that made a lot of sense. It's like, okay, great. Um, I can be able to build my application on top of my validator. And then now the cost for these requests are zero because it's subsidized by tau emissions. So then I could actually service the users I was looking to service. But yeah, even though I had that vision, um, quite the visionary, I was still quite early because the outputs weren't really that good. Like, I mean, they were like 7 billion parameter models. They weren't going to be that good, especially at that time where like open source models were just not that good. So it's like I got the idea down. I got how the architecture would look like. I'm just too early to really implement it. So what I did was just we deployed the first public validator when they made that available, like pretty much allowing anybody to kind of like trustlessly delegate their tau to any other validator. Because before you would pretty much have to gather your tau in a centralized way, and that kind of added too many trust assumptions. So like when they made things public, I launched Intranet, which was one of the first public validators, and quickly became one of the largest. And yeah, what we did was use like we had like this validator take fee of like 18%. What we did was just use that like revenue to essentially fund like the compute costs for the applications we were running on Hugging Face. Because like I said, like I learned about Hugging Face, so I was like, oh yeah, I'm all over Hugging Face. Let me go figure out how to like, you know, still be able to like create an application to service users, right? And on Hugging Face, they already had like some, very good models, and they had this way to kind of deploy an application right on their infrastructure, and then like people can easily go and play around with said application, and all you really need to do was just cover the compute costs, and that's what we did. We covered the compute costs with the revenue we was making with the validator, and if I'm being honest, it really blew up at that point. Like many people were using these applications. Like it brought in a tremendous amount of like like people outside of Bittensor like to like use these applications and then get interested in what Bittensor was, right? I guess at that time I seen that Bittensor was like this incentive layer before it became the incentive layer, but it was pretty controversial because people were like, "Oh, this isn't running on Bittensor." But I'm saying I was like, "But I'm using the validator to fund the cost of these applications. And at the end of the day, I'm bringing users, right? Because some of these users actually sticked around and eventually actually built some applications on Bitcoin itself. So yeah, like it went from there. It was pretty awesome. And then what we did was like, okay, we actually need to build an application on BitTensor. And the first thing we did was, we started really evaluating the outputs, trying to see how we can be able to like improve on the outputs the best that we could, you know, with whatever control we had at that time. And I remember back then there was I think it was called Chat Tensor. It was like this competitor to ChatGPT by OpenTensor. It was like it was awesome because they used this repo that was open source, and like yeah, like it was very cool to see because it was like, okay, this is the first application. This was like the proof of concept for actually doing what I had in mind, which was building an application on top of the validator. And like, yeah, that prompted me to create Chat NI, which was, you know, a fork of the same repository, but built on top of our validator, right? And we had to make a few changes to the repository just to make it work for the validator at that time. Because when Chat Tensor came out, it was like a beginning of um like it was a little bit after like ChatGPT came out, and then a couple months after that we released Chat AI, and then we open sourced it, and there was like a lot of competition at the time with myself and Taostats Mog Machine because he was also trying to build this application, and he actually forked our repository and he launched Corcel, and it's still running to this day, which is beautiful. And yeah, like it because of that initial application, that always kind of like gave me the confidence to like continue innovating, continue figuring out how to like build on top of Bittensor, right? And like one of the first things that we realized was like if we want to be able to build like any applications on top of a validator, we just need to ensure stake is on our validator. And at that time, like it was just trying to attract stake from nominees, by just convincing them about our plan and what we're gonna do with the revenue from the validator. That was like the method of doing it. But like what we try to do was like think outside the box. It's like, okay, at that time there was like 80 to 90% Tau staked. So it was like all this liquidity is kind of locked right now. It's unaccessible. So what we wanted to do was essentially create like a liquid staking derivative, right? So it was like stake Tau, ST Tau. So then people could actually be able to move around Tau while keeping their Tau staked, still earning their yield, but then they can go provide liquidity, they can go, let's say, play around with DeFi and what have you. Like that was the goal. Obviously, it didn't pan out because it was like a lot of things that shifted at that time for us, and we pivoted to focusing on like Subnet 27 and compute, and like we seen like that was like the thing that we needed to prioritize because we seen that every other subnet needed compute, so we wanted to really be the provider of said compute. But like in my heart, I still wanted to build this like liquid staking derivative. And like I remember seeing like a few other teams actually get funded, and they attempted to do the same thing. There was only one that actually did it. It was Tensorplex. They accomplished the goal of releasing staked tau. But then like with dynamic tau, everything shifted. Now the goal of like tau, we don't want tau to be staked. We don't want tau to be staked on root. We want tau to be in the liquidity pools across all the subnets. Like that's the new goal for tau and said liquidity. So like yeah, like the idea was still there. Luckily we didn't, spend the resources to really build out the liquid staking derivative because then it would have kind of made a waste because of the shift to dynamic tau. But then they kind of prompted this new idea, which is what we have now with VoidAI, where it's like, sure, dynamic tau is, you can kind of say like each individual subnet is like a liquid staking derivative for tau. But like the analogy breaks down because like each subnet has a different value and like so on and so forth. But what we wanted to do is like, okay, like our idea is still there. Like all this liquidity is still stuck on Bittensor. What we want to do is essentially create the bridge so then this liquidity can flow, right? It can flow across any other chain very freely while simultaneously solving interoperability, right? Not just for like Tau, like what we were trying to do before, but for every single alpha token, for Tau and every single alpha token, for the entire Bittensor ecosystem. Our goal became just to try to turn Bittensor from this single chain to multi-chain, right? And the way to do that was essentially creating this bridge and essentially doing it in a way where like we're creating wrapped tokens, right? And this kind of goes into like the first slide right here. Oh my God. Yep, yep. There you go. There you go. It kind of goes into the first slide where it's like the things that we're trying to solve for, right? There's a few things. Like the easiest thing to for anybody to wrap their head around is like the biggest barrier to entry is having to like download this Bittensor wallet, having to like worry about switching between validators, to then finally stake your tau into an alpha, like into alpha, right, to get allocated. That's one of the problems we're trying to solve is by reducing that barrier to entry, simplifying the user experience, and the easiest way to do that is like, bringing Bittensor to where everybody is already familiar with, right? Everybody's already, operating on Solana, on Ethereum, on these layer twos. So what made the most sense is bridging these tokens over to Solana, over to Ethereum, over to Base. So now you could be able to buy and sell very easily in a couple clicks on, let's say, Radium or on Uniswap using your Phantom wallet or even using your MetaMask wallet. And you don't have to worry about, you know, using like other solutions to try to accomplish the same goal. Like there's competitors, like for example, TauFi, which is essentially allowing people to do something similar. Like if you have a MetaMask wallet, you can be able to swap your USDC into Alpha. There's a few steps. Obviously, the USDC needs to, travel to Bittensor EVM, get converted into Tau, and then from Tau into Alpha token, right? But then that Alpha is, stuck in the interchain accounts. Like there's a lot of trust assumptions with this model where like users, sure, they're using their native wallets, well, not native wallet, they're using the wallets that they're most familiar with, but they still have to go through a process that they're not familiar with, right? And this is kind of like why we wanted to create the wrap tokens. It's like what people are most familiar with is just, you know, connected their MetaMask wallet, going on to Uniswap, specifying which tokens they want to swap into, and just clicking swap. Simple as that, right? And then you get your tokens. Sure, they may be synthetics, they may be a wrap token, but it's still one to one with the real token. So in reality, it might as well be the native. Because what you can do is take this wrap token, go to our bridge, and just bridge back. And you get your native token in a second, immediately right into your wallet. So then you can start earning in the staking rewards. And that was like the problem that we solved is like, we reduce our barrier to entry, improve the user experience, while at the same time solving the interoperability problem. And also like there's a few problems with like liquidity, but like that's just specific to like the way that Bittensor structured the liquidity pools. But it's not really too important because the way that we're structuring these cross-chain assets, they will only live within these V3 concentrated liquidity pools just so then like the liquidity is most efficient, right? And what I mean by that is like you can kind of see it right here. For V2 AMMs and concentrated liquidity pools, in the scenario where like we had, $10 million of TVL in, the Tau 64 pool, if the current price is $30, that means only $500,000 of liquidity is essentially active around the range of $30. So if a trader attempted to try to like swap $1 million, they will be impacted of like 2 to 3% from slippage. And that's only because there's such a small amount of liquidity, $500,000, that was actually used to trade compared to like V3 pools where like in the same scenario, $10 million TVL in that liquidity pool, 50% of that means $5 million is actually within the range of $25 to $35. So then that same $1 million trade moves the price only 0.5%. And this is important, like, because like people are like, oh, across chain, like the liquidity isn't as much as, Bittensor natively. There's $100 million on, the V2 liquidity pool for Tau 64. So that definitely means like, it's a lot better, right? But no, what we're trying to say is like, if it's $100 million in the V2 pool, right? The user experience will be exactly the same if they try to trade on the V3 pool across chain. But the difference is instead of having like $100 million in the liquidity pool, let's just say there's only $10 million. To the user, there's no difference in the user experience. It's exactly the same because of this concentration. Like more of that liquidity is concentrated within the range which is most used, right? And that's very, very important because like we don't need to reach the same level of liquidity that's currently within the liquidity pools on Bittensor. We just need to get the liquidity pools thick enough so then people could be able to make trades, right? Very freely. And you can kind of see that right here on Raptown, right? Raptown USDC on Solana. There's $45,000 liquidity, but there was almost $200,000 traded in the last 24 hours, right? And it's because the miners, what they're doing is that they're providing liquidity in the specific range as close as possible to the current price, right? Just to be able to allow these traders to be able to trade freely at the current range. But if for any reason, let's say you can kind of see it, the price action, the price went from $350 down to $326. I was watching it during that price action. The liquidity, it dropped a bit, but that was because the miners were rebalancing. What they were trying to do is take out the liquidity, change the range, and then redeploy the liquidity. And the reason they did this is because the way that we've designed the incentive mechanism, you can kind of see it right here. The way that we designed the incentive mechanism is that if they fall out of range, the moment they do, they receive zero incentive. Doesn't matter if there's liquidity still in the pool. Doesn't matter like if they're let's say for the top price, right? If the price is $325, Doesn't matter if your range is like 300 to 310. You're out of the range which is most traded, which is 320 to $330. If you're not within this range, you will receive zero incentive, right? And that was very important because like it turns our miners into like these active liquidity managers. They're constantly trying to like optimize and rebalance liquidity to stay within range so then they can continue earning emissions. And by them doing so, it aligns with the product. Now they're always ensuring that our traders are getting the best user experience with the lowest slippage, right? And that's because we've aligned incentives. It's not like we're over here begging our miners to stay aligned and rebalance for us. No, we've structured the incentive mechanism in a way that aligns with the work that they're going to do with the product that we're providing our users. And that was a huge breakthrough. And it's funny because Subnet 10, they actually had a different model where like they were incentivizing liquidity providers based on the fees that were earned on each position. But then they ran into a few problems, a few bugs, and I let them know, I was like, look, do it based on the liquidity range and proximity, similar to how we're doing it with 106, and it will solve these problems. Yeah, and then like a couple hours after they changed their incentive mechanism to do exactly that. And yeah, you could already start seeing some of the liquidity, rebalancing and flowing correctly. And it's funny because like one of the miners quoted that like, you know, before this change, it took like I think it was like a couple hours to a day or so for the position to get rebalanced. So like it kind of shows right there. The incentive was misaligned. Sure, like, you're looking to try to incentivize based on the fees that are produced, but in a scenario where like they become out of range, there's no way to kind of like force them back into range, right? The only way was to, you know, use exactly what we're doing, which is, incentivizing based on, the liquidity that they're providing within the range and proximity. And like this is huge because like we took it a step further, obviously, because what we've seen is that like it's not enough to like, force them in range to try to like make sure that the product is the best that it could in terms of like user experience and slippage. But it's also like we don't want to have this value leak, right? And we've been a part of DeFi since 2020. We've seen this happen time and time again. If you just give away tokens to liquidity providers, especially at that time, back then it was only V2 pools, so it was even worse. But ignoring that fact, if you just provide tokens to liquidity providers and then they're also earning trading fees, then there's a value leak. There's too much going out and not enough coming back in, right? And that's what we try to change. What we did is like, okay, the miners are not only focused on these V3 liquidity pools, but at the same time, when they provide liquidity, they receive this like position NFT, which represents their ownership within the liquidity pool. And what we did was have them stake that NFT within the platform, so then they could start earning emissions. And then it's even easier for the validators to really evaluate their position, so then they can make sure they're always in range. And when they're out of range, they give them zero incentive. And like by doing this, not only like it made it easier to evaluate, but it also enabled us to capture all the trading fees. And that's huge because you can kind of look at Bittensor right now where it's like what $166 million was traded in the last 24 hours. That's huge. Like now imagine like for example, looking at Ethereum, right? There's $93 billion of, value locked within DeFi. And this is excluding like various things, right? You could check up here, right? This is excluding staking, borrows, liquid staking, investing, a few things, right? If you add some of these things in, you can see that number growing, right? It's now 132 over here. But let's just exclude these things just to keep it simple. $93 billion. You can see it right here, right now. In the last 24 hours, it was $4 billion traded. That's huge. So like us bridging Bittensor to something like Ethereum, or even looking at Solana, right? There's less total value locked in DeFi, but look at the trading volume. It's almost the same as Ethereum. Sure, you can kind of say like most of the activity has gravitated to layer twos, like base, which makes sense. That's cool. But the 24-hour trading volume is still a key metric. Like, look, it's $3 billion. While we're over here looking at $160 million traded on Bittensor natively. So now imagine if we manage to capture even just 10% of that 160 million and it happens across chain, we're charging 0.25% fee on that. So like that's a tremendous amount of value that we're able to capture that will flow back into the token. And this is like a very specific decision that we made, like just to ensure our economics, like it just makes sense, as feasible as possible, right? And there's been a few questions from the miners, like, oh, why are you guys capturing the trading fees? I say it's because we're trying to make this economically feasible. We want to make sure this is sustainable, right? Self-sustainable at that. We want to make sure what we're paying out in tokens is less than what we're bringing in bridge fees, staking rewards, trading fees, right? And then eventually we have these other products that we will be able to build on top of the same infrastructure, like lending and borrowing. So then we could be able to earn from loan origination fees, from interest spreads, right? And a few other products that, we have in our roadmap. But like, yeah, it's just so many things to like really piece together to kind of really see why we've made these decisions. But like fundamentally, like you can see it at a high level, we managed to solve these problems, right? We solved the problem of Bittensor being siloed within, one chain by creating this cross-chain bridge layer, right? So now these tokens could be bridged across chain, essentially in the version of wrap tokens. And what we've done to ensure these wrap tokens have healthy markets across chain is by essentially creating this liquidity layer where now we're providing incentives in the form of Subnet 106 tokens for providing liquidity, right? That's where I say incentivize the concentrated liquidity pools. And then because of these two things, right, now you can see, for example, Tau, 64, so on and so forth, as wrap tokens on Solana in the form of SPL tokens. And what that means is like now these tokens are composable. And like the best analogy, well, this is probably better, but like Siam pretty much said it best, was like when thinking about bridging, it's like, you're putting on a spacesuit on the token. So then it could be able to like survive in this new environment, right? Like when we put on a spacesuit, so then we could be able to survive in space. So it's the same thing. We're taking these Bittensor tokens, wrapping them, so then they could be able to function in this new environment, which is Solana in the form of SPL tokens, or on Ethereum in the form of ERC20 tokens. And by doing this, now they're instantly composable, right? And what that means is like we're able to integrate Bittensor to, for example, any DeFi application, or even just build a brand new DeFi application and then use the smart contracts that are currently on Solana, right? And we did that. We showed it as a proof of concept, but like that's also our first product. And we did it by essentially creating liquidity pools on Radium. So now you can be able to trade Bittensor on Solana through these liquidity pools on Radium. So that's part of being composable. And you will see the same thing once we're on Ethereum. You're going to be able to trade Bittensor tokens right from Uniswap. Like I'm not talking about the model like TauFi where you know bridging from base, Bittensor EVM, using their Uniswap clone to then, get tau to then get alpha. No, I'm talking about the native Uniswap protocol on Ethereum will support tau and alpha tokens in the form of ERC20s, wrap tokens. So then it's very, very easy to go provide liquidity on Uniswap or even just to trade on Uniswap. And like that's the first step, right? There's a few other ways that we can be able to integrate. Like for example, we have plans to integrate into Aave, and that's huge because Aave is like one of the biggest DeFi protocols in the world with like almost $20 billion of value locked within it. So like, it makes a lot of sense. Instead of us trying to like create like fork Aave and bootstrap it with liquidity, like some of our other competitors, we're just integrating directly into their technology and we're capturing the network effects that they're already offering. And that's huge because like, then you don't have to worry about all these added trust assumptions like when you're using like alternatives, right, from other ecosystems, right? Aave has been battle tested as using Chainlink oracles just to, you know, handle liquidations. Like if I was to build out a lending platform or at least essentially like provide the services of borrowing and lending to users, the way to go about it is just to integrate into Aave rather than trying to build from scratch. And that's part of the composability layer, right? And then the last piece, I feel like that was like the first thing we highlighted, which was we've made improvements on the UX. Now they just swap right on Uniswap or Radium. Simple as that.
So I have one follow up here, really. What advantage do you guys have being a subnet? Why is this something that benefits from the subnet architecture?
Great question. Perfect question, actually. So the biggest thing is like subnets are these open competitions, these open tournaments, right? So when we launched the bridge to Solana, we quickly realized that we needed to be able to incentivize liquidity providers, and like the way to do it was not necessarily like the traditional route, where like we kind of like just create a token on Solana or on Ethereum, and then we just you know add it into like Radium or Uniswap as like incentivized liquidity provisioning. Like that was like the traditional way of doing it back in the day when DeFi first came out, right? And we've seen a lot of flaws and limitations with that model, especially with the idea of like uh like it just gets to a point where there's far too much participation and then there's far too much value leaking from like trading fees that just like it just never became sustainable. So what we've seen with like a subnet architecture is like, hey, we could have these liquidity providers operating within a subnet, and since there's only 256 UIDs, it will get to a point where the competition becomes extremely intense because the ceiling has been reached. Now there's no more UIDs that can be registered. The only way that you could register a UID is by kicking out, the least performing UID. And that is essential for us, right? We only want to be able to incentivize the best liquidity providers, right? Just so then we could be able to like continuously like intensify the competition by deploying on multiple different chains. Because like the biggest thing is like you don't want to over incentivize liquidity providers. And then at the same time, you want to really enforce this competition so then like they're always attempting to try to like perform the best, right? Because if they're complacent, they're just like, oh, you know, I could just provide liquidity in the minimal form just to try to extract emissions. Like that's not possible within 106 because you will be quickly outperformed by someone that's actually trying to like stay within range. They have like bots and they've already automated like the rebalancing. you'll quickly get kicked out within the network. And that is why we chose to create this as a subnet. And at the same time, if I'm being honest, like the validators also have a job. Their job is to evaluate the positions from the miners and then incentivize them accordingly, right? And that only could have been done if, we've built it as a subnet. So like in theory, like outside of the economics, like tokenomics, we're like 21 million, fair launch, you know, it, all these things combined is the reason why we chose to build it as a subnet compared to just minting a bunch of tokens and then just doing the traditional route of liquidity mining.
What is the correlation you guys are seeing between emissions and liquidity provided through your subnet?
Yeah, so what we've done is like we try to do it in a way where it was like the most fair. We didn't want it to have it where like the token holders kind of dictated like which pools to support, but at the same time they kind of dictated the weight per pool. We didn't want that because like there could be opportunity for misalignment, and at the same time like it can create like centralization forces where like we don't really want to like we don't want to deal with, especially with the way that we've designed this. So what we've done is like we've done it in a way where like right now we're supporting most subnets in terms of liquidity. I mean in terms of incentive with 106, right? Just so we can kind of like just go to market and just allow participation immediately. But the way the weight is determined, it mirrors tau emissions. And the reason we wanted to go this route is because like it aligns perfectly with Bittensor. If you're a subnet that's outperforming, continuously innovating, adding value to Bittensor, then you'll see your tau emissions growing. You'll see the price, growing. And because that tau emission is growing, because of that shift, like that is alpha. Like that's something that we want to be able to capture. Like for example, 62 overtaking 64, even if it was temporarily or whatever, that is huge. We want to be able to have our emissions as dynamic as that, right? So in a scenario where like, boom, there was this new up and comer like 62 just went from the bottom of the ranks all the way to the top. We want 106 emissions to be just as adaptive, right? If they went from, I don't know, 0.1% emissions all the way to 5% emissions, we want to see that same thing with 106 emissions, right? Go from 0.1%, I mean, yeah, 0.10 all the way to 5%. We want to see that adaptability because it reinforces that value that has been already discovered by the Bittensor network, right? Like the whole point of tau emissions is to like really figure out where the innovation's happening, where the value lies. So instead of us having to like recreate the wheel, we just, mirrored it, right? We try to like capture that same adaptability.
Your current design mirrors BitTensor admissions. So your subnet gives admissions to specific liquidity pools based on their actual weighting in BitTensor.
Yeah.
Overall, you guys have about 200,000, I think, a little bit more maybe, in the total value locked into these pools. Is it dependent on higher admissions for that number to go up?
No, actually the competition can force this. And like this is a perfect time to showcase this right here. So this is a miner dashboard, right? We made an update this week just to kind of show a lot more data. You can kind of see it right here. We show the TVL, we show the latest trading volume, and we show the incentive, right? You can kind of see, you can sort by incentive. We have a set amount of 25% for tau, mainly because we want to ensure that there's liquidity depth for tau across these different chains, because at the end of the day, wrapped tau is tied to every single other wrapped alpha token. So as long as wrapped tau was liquid, then it's easy for people to participate in these other pools. And you can kind of see it. $165,000 of volume in the last 24 hours. Most likely is miners. It's most likely people just trading in and out because of arbitrage opportunities, or is miners looking to purchase wrapped tau right from the liquid market, so then they could tie it with their wrapped alpha, so then they could be able to participate in any one of these pools, right? And then going to answer your question in terms of the competition, you could see it right here, right? It's constantly shifting, constantly shifting. Now the number one has about $23,000 of liquidity, and we can kind of see which pool they're focused on, right? Since they could be able to stake multiple NFTs, it kind of totals up their amount right here. But their main focus is on wrapped tau USDC. So like if someone wanted to be like, hey, I want to be the number one miner on the subnet, now you know what it takes. If the number one is currently at 24,000, who's to know what range, because they have multiple different positions, who's to know which ones are in range? And you can kind of take an estimate. The one that actually has incentive is most likely in range. But what we're also gonna make an update soon, and we're gonna add a column where it shows like, okay, is it in range or not? And if it is, it will say active. If it's not, it will say not active. And it should help with the competition too. But my point is, if I wanted to compete and I wanted to overtake this number one guy, I would deploy $25,000 of liquidity on the Raptile USDC pool, and then I'll try to make sure that all that liquidity is as close to the current price as possible. Try to keep it within range, right? And that's what most miners are doing now. Like the dashboard when we first launched, we didn't have this data. So the competition was like everybody was kind of like competing in the dark. Nobody really knew what the other guy was really pretty much doing to earn emissions. So, we worked on a new version. We released this new version. Now you can see the data, and now you could see, you know, what the top guy is doing. You can see what the liquidity is. You can see which pools they're working on, and you can see whether they're in range or not. And then you can then compete from that point, and that's huge, right? And there's some people that, you know, they may compete by just deploying on, let's say, pools are not even looked at. Like for example, if we go back to the pool section, right, and you go back to the incentives, right, you can see right here that 6.84% of 106 emissions, minor emissions, is being paid out to liquidity providers that are contributing to the RapTau Rap 64 pool. So there's opportunity there. Like if I was a brand new miner and I was trying to figure out where I can be able to come in and compete, I'll try to look at where there's very little competition. For example, like the 120 pool, like the 64 pool, like the 62 pool, right? A lot of the miners are competing on the RapTau pool because there's a lot of emissions. But everybody knows with competition, especially once it gets extremely intense, they're just going to compete away all the profits. So it'll get to a point where it's like, yeah, you got to find an alternative, right? And the only alternatives is trying to like deploy into one of these other pools, right? Or even just trying to like, outmatch everybody else in the same liquidity pool by just deploying a bunch of liquidity, and now you've just captured all the emissions. So like, there's a bunch of ways to really compete here, and that's very exciting. This is what we like to see, and like you can kind of see it on the main page. Once we're on Ethereum, Base, Inc., the emission distribution will be spread across these four different chains. So then, like now, the competition is not only between these different liquidity pools on one chain, but now it's between multiple chains, and then on each individual chain, there's liquidity pools as well. So like they're looking at the competition on Solana, they're looking at the competition on Ethereum, Base, Inc., and they'll try to figure out where to deploy to try to increase the total amount of missions and the rank within the leaderboard. And then at the end of the day, that helps us because that increases the liquidity depth. And at the same time, it enables traders to be able to swap very freely with very low slippage because majority of that liquidity is in range. And then we earn those trading fees because of that.
And those trading fees currently are 0.5% for the Tau bridge, I believe, and then 1.5% for the Alpha bridge. How
So
do you anticipate
that's,
these will change over time?
yeah, great question. So what you're referring to was actually the bridge fees. It's like when people bridge from Bittensor to Solana, they pay like 0.5% if it's Tau, and then if it's Alpha, it's 1.5%. And we have these fees just to then cover gas fees, and like, yeah, we have like few ideas in mind, that we're exploring. Maybe like potentially having people like hold a certain amount of tokens so then they can get a discount on the fees, like the bridge fees at least. But that's still something that we're brainstorming. But in regards to like the trading fees, like the percentage, like seeing that change, um, I don't see that really changing too much. The one thing I do see changing is like how people participate, right? And like, let me see. Yeah, yeah. Give me a second. Let me open it up just so I can kind of explain what I mean, because this is actually very interesting, right? Let's see. Because right now there's a few ways to kind of participate to kind of earn incentives, and like this is one thing that I kind of I I I was explaining to a few participants early on. It's like you got to look at what's more profitable for you as a liquidity provider, right? Whether it's providing liquidity, like you know, like providing liquidity within the liquidity pool and just earning trading fees, or providing liquidity and then mining on 106, so then you earn emissions. You got to figure out which is more profitable. And like, let me just kind of show that now. Yeah, here.
I also had another question of after liquidity pools, do you guys plan on having any other product offerings?
Yeah, totally. There's a few things that we have in mind. Like I kind of briefly spoke about it. Like the lending platform we were thinking about. We're just gonna integrate into Aave mainly because Aave released like a new version, it was like V4, where like now you could finally be able to like build on top of Aave instead of just forking Aave. Now you could kind of build your own like you can build your own on top of Aave, like another version, but like with like the tokens you want to support, right? And they kind of support you based on whether or not they agree with the tokens that you're bringing to the market. You see, and I can kind of go into it a lot more. Let me just kind of show you this first, so I can like, move on from the point. So yeah, right here where it's like you can see it. If you wanted to participate in the wrap tau USDC pool, you could see right now the APR is like 300%, right? In the last 24 hours, $411 was earned, right? And that's huge. That's huge. So like you as a liquidity provider, you have to evaluate whether or not it's more profitable to operate in the traditional way, just providing liquidity, earning your trading fees, or providing liquidity, taking your NFT, staking it onto our dashboard, initiating mining on 106, so then you earn emissions. You have to figure out which is more profitable, right? And it fluctuates every day. Like you can see it, like this is 600 and 602 was because there's very little liquidity, but there was a lot of volume. Like there's a lot of nuance, right? But like, there is some opportunity, especially as liquidity grows. Like right? Right here, there's like 8,000 liquidity, 24% APR because of the 2,300 trading volume in the last 24 hours. So all this is constantly changing every day. So like the miners need to constantly look at this, and then they look at the dashboard and the mining operation, the leaderboard to try to see where the competition is, right? And I've already seen like a few people bridge over and they've already provided liquidity and they're not looking to mine on 106. They're just looking to provide liquidity and then they capture the trading fees. And that's fine. We still earn from these participants, right? We earn from the bridge fee and we're actively earning from the staking rewards, right? We may not be earning from the trading fees because they're keeping it, but that's fine. We're still able to earn and we're not even paying them emissions. So like there's no cost to us for them even operating.
You said you earn the staking rewards. Can you clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, totally. So let me go right here. Yeah, share this tab. So, oh wow, we hit a new all-time high. It's awesome. See, we did it right or live. That's beautiful. Okay, so right now the TVL just hit an all-time high of 831 tau. We've been holding off on publicly, mentioning this. We're trying to wait till 1,000 tau and then we make a post about it. But yeah, point is like a lot of like when people bridge over the assets that they bridge over, whether it's tau or alpha, that's automatically staked onto the supported validators that we have. So you can kind of see our balance right here. And then you can kind of track the staking rewards accumulating every day, right? You can see with 63, we're earning staking rewards. With Root, we're earning staking rewards. Same thing with 64 and so on, right? This is constantly, we're growing the staking rewards. And as the TVL grows, the total amount that we earn from staking rewards grow. So it's very interesting. This is something that I mentioned to like on the revenue search is like right now the biggest revenue stream is the staking rewards, without a doubt, without a doubt. Um, Second to that is bridge fees. Third to that is trading fees, right? But I said that like I predict that once we get to that point where there's far more liquid market across chain and far more people know about it, and there's far more trading volume overall, I could definitely see trading fees get to a point where it's like pretty much right there equal to how much we earn with staking rewards, right? And it goes back to what I was mentioning before with like, on Solana, Ethereum, there's like billions of dollars traded. There's only like 160 million on Bittensor. If we manage to replicate that same amount of trading volume while charging 0.25%, that's where you start seeing, a lot of value created.
Do you feel the limiting factor in the trading increasing is the actual interest out there to trade these wrap tokens, or the size of the liquidity pools being the limiting factor?
Definitely the size, but like, yeah, sure, there's some liquidity pools with like, 1,000 to 10,000, and you may think like, oh, who's trading these tokens? There's only like, $5 to $10,000 in this liquidity pool. But because these are concentrated liquidity pools, then yeah, you could be able to trade like, like a good amount, like a couple thousands worth back and forth. And that's kind of what we've seen with right here with RapTow. Yeah, with RapTow, where it was like there's only 45,000 liquidity. You kind of scroll down, you can see it right here. 37,000 of that 45 is RapTow. 7,000 is USDC. This constantly is changing. They're constantly rebalancing this just so then, good service users. But my point is, because of this right here, 45,000, you could still be able to service a user just trying to trade like 10,000, 20,000, right? And like that's per transaction. So like that's where you see like something like a total of 200,000, even though we only have like $40,000 of liquidity. That's the different. That's the important point to touch on. It's like what's preventing people from trading is the liquidity, but is not as bad because we're using V3 pools and we're actually incentivizing liquidity providers, and because we've created this environment where it's a intense competition, then we will see the liquidity gradually increasing over time. And that's what I've seen. Like since day one, RapTown was at 0%. I mean, excuse me, zero, like, I think it was like $100 of liquidity when we launched. Now it's at 45,000. Same thing with every other liquidity pool that we support. Like it was negligent. But now it has something, right? And they will continue growing as the competition continues to intensify, as we continue to make tweaks so, we could increase that competition. I could definitely see things improving in terms of liquidity depth, which would just bring more users. And one of the biggest thing too is like, even if we have the liquidity depth, right? Even if like the wrap tokens are clear as day what they are, we still want to be able to have that distribution, right? We want to be able to put this in front of as many eyes as possible. And the one way to do that is by integrating channeling CCIP on our Ethereum bridge and then bridging to base. And by doing so, now Tau and Alpha tokens are wrap tokens in the form of ERC20s. And because they're ERC20s on base, they're immediately tradable on the Coinbase app as of yesterday. Like I was checking yesterday to try to see like, okay, is there any tokens that they missed? And Timo actually launched like a project, and I seen his project right on the Coinbase app, and I could literally buy and sell it, and it's awesome. So it's like everything's already there. Like the only thing we really need to do is just lay the infrastructure, turn on those incentives, and the liquidity will start flowing. And then now those liquidity pools will have some depth, and then they will start, become tradable. And then you start seeing a lot more activity, especially from these users from Coinbase. And that was like the biggest thing we wanted to solve for. Like that's why we even targeted Solana to begin with. Outside of the idea of like, oh yeah, nobody has bridged to Solana, but mainly because most of the traders, most of the liquidity and builders currently, this cycle at least, is within Solana. So we just wanted to be we just wanted to bridge to one of the largest markets just so then we could try to like get the greatest distribution. But then Coinbase came out with this update and that became the greater distribution. But either way, we're still, killing two birds with one stone. We're on Solana, we're on Ethereum, we're on Base, just so then we can be able to capture as much demand from various user bases as possible.
All right, Hansel. I got one last question for you today.
Man, I forgot I said 1 hour and look, we're already like an hour and a half. My goodness.
Yeah, no, this has been very informative. But all right, one last question here.
Yeah.
And that is, what advice do you have for participants in Bittensor to embrace or take advantage of the crypto aspects of being in crypto? Or what advice do you have? I guess I should say, or what advice do you have for general crypto participants taking advantage of Bittensor and capturing value in Bittensor? So either way there.
Okay, so in terms of participants within the Bittensor ecosystem, I say take advantage of the rails that we're laying, this infrastructure that we've created, right? So then you can go and try to build, various types of applications, like, outside of the idea of like bridging over, providing liquidity, so then you can increase liquidity depth for the tokens that you support, just so then you can be able to, tap into this larger market. That's, one of the main reasons. But another reason is like, yeah, like you can go and build. Like I know there was a team that we were talking to that wanted to build like this no code mining experience, and they needed smart contracts to handle the payouts. And like I let them know, I was like, look, this is exactly the infrastructure that we, this is exactly the reason we created this infrastructure. So then you could be able to go bridge over, create that smart contract, hold your wrap tokens in that smart contract, and that will handle payouts. And it's funny enough because Subnet 27, that's exactly what we're doing. And that's enabling us to actually create the first trustless cloud platform that actually resembles something like a run pod without having to worry about dilution and just paying out emissions continuously. And I doubt that's one of the key things that I want to highlight for the Bittensor ecosystem participants. It's like, think outside the box, figure out what you can be able to do with this technology. Try to see how you can be able to incorporate smart contracts in a way where you can be able to change your incentive landscape, right? Just so then you could be able to force your miners to try to, do exactly what you want them to do, to try to like, you know, create the product that you're looking for. And then for the general crypto participants, like look at the fact that we have these bridges now live. Ethereum will be live in like a couple weeks. But look at the fact that you could actually trade these tokens and try to explore like what is a true value of these different tokens, right? Because they're not meme coins. They're probably the highest form of a utility token. So try to figure out what is the value of these different assets, right? Bridge back to Bittensor, or even just explore the ecosystem. Try to figure out what these different subnets do. Don't just be an investor. Try to really understand the technology so you could see the implications, right? Because there may be opportunities for you, just like myself, right? I try to understand the implications and the technology of Bittensor when it first came out, and then that enabled me to then devote my time so then I could run a validator just so then I could gain access so then I could build these applications. That same scenario could happen for you in various different ways, right? Because so many different types of subnets, right? There's subnets for mining Bitcoin, OTC subnets, compute subnets, inference subnets, training subnets. There's huge opportunities. So like, yeah, look into the different subnets. Try to see if you want to participate as a miner, as a validator, see what you can do.
Hansel, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, man. I really appreciate the support.